The auditorium was packed wall to wall, an international symposium on governance, hosted at Georgetown University. Cameras clicked, phones rose, and murmurs filled the air as two unexpected figures took the stage. On one side stood Denzel Washington, sharp in a black tailored suit, calm but unmistakably intense. On the other, Ibrahim Traoré, the young leader of Burkina Faso, flanked by two stone-faced advisors. The moment was electric. Moderator's voice cut through the tension. Let's begin with the question on everyone's mind. What defines legitimate power in the 21st century? Before Traoré could answer, Denzel leaned forward, voice controlled yet cutting. Let's start by defining what it isn't: power that silences critics, jails journalists, and calls it stability. A ripple spread through the audience. Traoré's lips tightened. You speak like you know my country better than I do, Mr. Washington. Denzel didn't blink. I don't need to know your soil to recognize oppression. The signs are universal: fear, force, and flags used as muzzles. Traoré's eyes narrowed. Be careful. Words spoken from luxury are often detached from reality. Denzel's reply came like a scalpel. No, detachment is pretending dictatorship is development. You wear a suit, hold a mic, but rule with a fist. Don't dress it up. The room gasped. A few people stood. The moderator tried to intervene. Gentlemen. But Denzel raised his hand. I'm not here to debate. I'm here to remind the world, if you call yourself a leader, you don't get to be above the people. You serve them. You bleed with them. Or you're just another man playing God. Traoré sat frozen. His jaw clenched, but he said nothing. And just like that, the world was listening. The next morning, every major outlet had the same headline: Denzel Washington calls Traoré a dictator, to his face. CNN, BBC, Al Jazeera, and Le Monde looped the footage relentlessly. On TikTok, the clip hit 60 million views before breakfast. But it wasn't just a viral moment, it was a diplomatic tremor. At a press conference in Ouagadougou, a tight-lipped Traoré stood before his flag, his tone cold as steel. Mr. Washington's comments are an insult to the people of Burkina Faso. We are not a dictatorship. We are sovereign. But sovereignty was no longer the conversation. On The View, Whoopi Goldberg called the exchange the most honest moment in modern politics. On X, a trending hashtag emerged, #DenzelDaresDictators. Meanwhile, back in Washington, D.C., Denzel sat in a private interview with MSNBC's Rachel Maddow. His tone was calm, but the fire remained. I wasn't attacking a man, he said. I was challenging a mindset, one that confuses control with leadership. That mindset destroys nations, and it doesn't care what continent it's on. Maddow blinked. And you're not worried about retaliation? He smirked. If speaking the truth causes fallout, maybe we've built peace on a lie. The studio fell silent. Across continents, his words ignited fires. Students in Accra held up banners reading, "Dictators wear suits too." A protest sparked in Johannesburg. Even European leaders were asked to comment, and some didn't like the spotlight turning toward Africa's strongmen. And yet, Denzel didn't flinch. Because what he'd started wasn't a soundbite. It was a spark. And sparks? They travel fast. In Geneva, the United Nations Human Rights Council convened for an emergency session. Not for war. Not for sanctions. But because an American actor had accused a sitting African leader of authoritarianism, and the world had listened. A delegate from Burkina Faso slammed his folder onto the desk. We will not be lectured by a man who plays heroes for a living. But the rebuttal came not from Denzel, but from a Senegalese activist seated in the back row. She stood up without a microphone. Maybe it takes a man who pretends to be a hero, to finally act like one. The room froze. Back in Los Angeles, the entertainment world couldn't look away. Celebrities lined up on social media, some in support, others demanding Denzel stay in his lane. But Denzel didn't tweet. He didn't post. Instead, he walked onto the set of a pre-scheduled panel on global justice. No makeup. No smile. Let's talk about lanes, he said into the mic. Who decided which truth belongs to which person? Since when is justice a private playground? Meanwhile, Traoré was no longer playing defense. On national television, flanked by military officers, he responded with chilling calm. Mr. Washington does not understand our history. He does not live our reality. And if he continues to interfere, he will face the consequences of involving himself in sovereign matters. The message wasn't lost in translation. For the first time in his career, Denzel received a warning from the U.S. State Department. Still, when asked if he would apologize, he answered simply, "Not now. Not ever." The silence after that sentence was louder than any speech. Because now, it wasn't just about one leader and one actor. It was about the audacity to speak. And the cost of truth. The White House press room buzzed like a hornet's nest. Can the administration clarify its stance on Mr. Washington's remarks regarding President Traoré? A reporter barked, waving a copy of The Guardian with Denzel's face splashed across the front. The press secretary paused, then delivered a careful statement. Mr. Washington is a private citizen. His views do not reflect official U.S. foreign policy. We urge all voices to engage constructively. But the damage, or the clarity, was done. On the steps of the Lincoln Memorial, 1,000 protesters gathered holding handmade signs. Actors for Africa. Truth isn't treason. And one that read simply, Denzel. Across the Atlantic, a surprise came from France. President Macron, in a rare unscripted moment, said, "Maybe Mr. Washington has touched a nerve that needed touching." The internet went into frenzy. #Denzel diplomacy trended globally. Late-night shows clashed, some mocked, others admired. And then, a twist. Burkina Faso's government announced a cultural ban. All American films featuring Denzel Washington are hereby suspended. The crowd's reaction at Cannes Film Festival was electric. Directors, actors, and activists walked out in protest, holding placards that read, "You can silence a movie. Not a message." Meanwhile, Traoré's next move came from the shadows. A leaked audio clip surfaced online. In it, he was heard saying, "If Washington keeps talking, maybe we should start asking questions about his own country's justice." Suddenly, the story was no longer about African politics, it was global accountability. Denzel stood outside a courthouse in California, journalists surrounding him like vultures. He didn't blink. "There's a reason dictators hate artists," he said calmly. "They can jail dissidents, silence reporters, but they can't kill an idea once it hits the stage." The smear campaign hit hard and fast. Right-wing media ran headlines like, "Hollywood meddler targets African sovereignty," and "Denzel's dictator talk backfires, who's the real threat?" A viral clip on a conservative news network showed a panelist laughing, "He's an actor, not a diplomat. Maybe he should stick to scripts instead of speeches." But Denzel, unfazed, posted a single tweet. History was written by those who refused to stay silent. Even when told to. Across college campuses, students lit candles. #spread like wildfire. #artists against oppression. #Denzel speaks for us. Meanwhile, President Traoré landed in Moscow. Cameras captured him shaking hands with Russian officials, flanked by military brass. He wasn't just defending his rule now, he was building alliances. One reporter asked him, "Are you weaponizing Denzel's words to gain sympathy abroad?" Traoré replied with a cold smile, "I'm simply showing the world who the real colonizers still are." The White House was forced to respond. In an unscheduled press conference, the National Security Advisor stated, "We support the sovereignty of all nations. But we will not endorse intimidation, whether by a dictator or by those who enable him." The tension reached boiling point when CNN hosted a global town hall. One audience member asked Denzel directly, "Do you regret calling Traoré a dictator?" He didn't hesitate. "No," he said, voice low but firm. "I regret that more people didn't say it first." The audience erupted. A clip of that moment was viewed over 80 million times in 24 hours. But the question remained. Would words be enough to challenge a regime built on fear? 3 days after the CNN town hall, an unexpected name entered the debate: the United Nations Secretary-General. Standing before the press in New York, he referenced the growing tension without naming names. "We urge all public figures, artists, and leaders alike to choose words that unite, not incite." But the world already knew who he meant. That same night, Denzel sat down for an exclusive interview with a BBC journalist. The host opened with a jab. "Do you realize that you, a Hollywood actor, are now shaping international relations?" Denzel smiled dryly. "I didn't choose to shape anything. I chose not to shut up." Across the globe, Traoré doubled down. At a rally in Ouagadougou, he addressed a massive crowd, flags waving, military vehicles on full display. "They say I'm a dictator because I refuse to kneel. They cheer for an actor who's never smelled the dust of revolution." The crowd roared. But something shifted that evening. A group of Burkinabe activists, young, passionate, and fearless, released a video titled, "The People Speak Back." One young woman stared directly into the camera. "We don't need foreign armies. We need truth. And we don't fear our president, we survive him." The clip spread globally. In the US, Congress quietly began drafting a bipartisan resolution condemning authoritarian regimes and praising the courage of individuals who use their voices for justice. Though Denzel was never named, everyone knew. Backstage at a youth conference, someone asked him if he feared retaliation. He answered, "Fear? No. But I know what silence costs." It wasn't just a media moment anymore. This was a movement. The Washington Post ran the headline in bold. "From actor to agitator, Denzel's words shake West Africa." Inside, a quote from a U.S. diplomat stood out. "He may not hold office, but make no mistake, his voice now carries the weight of one." Meanwhile, in Burkina Faso, Traoré's inner circle was rattled. Advisors warned him about the rising online unrest. Some videos were calling for new elections. Others accused the regime of silencing dissent. But Traoré wasn't backing down. On live national TV, he delivered a fiery speech. "Let the West worship their actors. Here, we fight with steel, not scripts." Denzel, hearing those words, made a rare move. He appeared at a global youth summit in Geneva. Cameras flashed. The room went silent. He took the stage and, without reading a single note, said, "If telling the truth makes me an enemy of dictators, then I'm exactly where I belong." Thunderous applause. Across the Atlantic, American talk shows exploded. Fox News accused Denzel of overstepping. MSNBC hailed him as a citizen revolutionary. Twitter trended. #Denzel versus dictatorship. #voiceover violence. Then, something unexpected happened. A leaked audio recording from inside the Burkinabe government revealed high-ranking officials debating how to neutralize the Washington effect. The world listened. The U.S. State Department issued a formal warning. Denzel's name was now on the radar of intelligence briefings. Yet that night, on his private balcony, Denzel told a close friend, "I never asked for this fight. But if it's here, I'll speak until they mute the sky." The war of words had become a battle of influence. And the next chapter would no longer be spoken. It would be written in global memory. CNN International flashed a headline that set the world on edge. "African regime labels Denzel a threat to national security." And just below it, in smaller text, "Burkina Faso demands apology, Hollywood silent." Denzel, as expected, didn't flinch. Instead, he joined a live-streamed roundtable moderated by Christiane Amanpour. The topic was art, power, and resistance. What started as a cultural discussion turned into political combustion when Amanpour posed the question. Mr. Washington, what do you say to those who claim you're interfering in foreign sovereignty? Denzel looked directly into the camera. I say silence is complicity. And if art can't question power, then it's not art, it's propaganda. The panel froze. Amanpour blinked. Then she nodded slowly. Meanwhile, Traoré's regime launched a counter-campaign. Billboards in Ouagadougou read, Burkina Faso will not bow to Hollywood. Propaganda videos called Denzel a foreign destabilizer. But something unexpected happened. Young citizens across the African continent began flooding social media with videos holding up handmade signs. Denzel's not our enemy. Fear is. Dictators hate voices they can't control. We stand with truth. A new movement was rising, not born of Western intervention, but of shared courage. Back in the U.S., senators were now debating whether to issue a formal statement supporting Denzel. One Republican senator slammed him for celebrity arrogance. A Democratic senator called him the conscience we forgot we had. Even President Biden was asked directly during a press briefing. Is Denzel Washington a threat or a truth-teller? Biden paused, then answered. That's for history to decide. But he's got our attention. And suddenly, the story was no longer just Denzel versus Traoré. It was the entire world watching two symbols collide, power and principle. A classified CIA memo leaked online. It read, Denzel Washington's influence in the Sahel region is no longer cultural, it is political. He has become a vector for ideological mobilization. The White House did not comment. But sources confirmed that a private briefing had been delivered to President Trump, who had returned to office just months ago. In the footage leaked from that briefing, Trump could be heard saying, if he wants to play diplomat, then maybe we should give him a job, or a target. Meanwhile, in Ouagadougou, Ibrahim Traoré made a chilling declaration on state television. There will be no uprising. No actor, no foreign voice will dictate the will of our people. Let Denzel understand, Burkina Faso bows to no stage. The world held its breath. Then, Denzel made his next move, not through another speech, but through action. He organized a live broadcast titled, Truth Beyond Borders, streamed simultaneously in 5 languages and beamed into African youth centers, European think tanks, and even a jumbotron in Times Square. He stood alone on a minimalist stage. A single spotlight. No teleprompter. Just his voice. I don't seek to rule. I seek to remind. That oppression, dressed in patriotism, is still oppression. That silence in the face of fear is not peace, it is obedience. And I didn't come to obey. A beat of silence. Then the screen behind him lit up with one word, enough. Millions watched. Thousands wept. Dozens of journalists called it the speech of a generation. The very next day, pro-democracy graffiti appeared overnight in the heart of Ouagadougou, unsigned, but unmistakably inspired. And across the Atlantic, Traoré's government froze all internet service. The message was clear, silence the signal, erase the fire. But it was too late. The flame was already global, the UN headquarters in New York was buzzing. Delegates from over 50 nations had requested an emergency session, not for war, not for peace treaties, but to address a single man's influence, Denzel Washington. Western media called it the actor's revolution. But on the ground, in cities from Bamako to Brussels, something deeper was brewing. Traoré, humiliated by Denzel's rising stature, launched what he called Operation Sovereign Voice, a global campaign to paint Denzel as a tool of Western propaganda. State-run media released deepfake videos of Denzel supposedly mocking African culture, claiming the actor had no love for the land he speaks of. Denzel responded the only way he knew how, truth, delivered raw. On a new broadcast, flanked by African-American scholars and human rights lawyers, he declared, "I'm not a puppet, and I'm not your enemy. But if standing for justice makes me a target, paint the bullseye." A hush fell over the room. Within 24 hours, a letter signed by over 300 African intellectuals was published in Le Monde. Denzel Washington does not speak for us. He speaks with us. And for the first time in a long time, the world listens. Even the Vatican chimed in. A senior cardinal tweeted, "When actors speak truth louder than states, perhaps the stage has become the last altar of honesty." Meanwhile, Traoré's grip tightened. Journalists disappeared. Protesters were jailed. His paranoia grew with each passing headline. And in the U.S., President Trump, feeling sidelined by Denzel's spotlight, scheduled an unexpected press conference, ending it with one ominous sentence. "I think it's time Mr. Washington remembered he's not elected." The stage was no longer just media. It was geopolitics. And Denzel? He wasn't backing down. The summit was never supposed to happen. And yet, in Geneva, under the flicker of crystal chandeliers and the eyes of every major broadcast network on Earth, Denzel Washington and Ibrahim Traoré stood, not as friends, not as enemies, but as two men whose words had redrawn the lines of global influence. Moderator's voice trembled as she announced, "We begin tonight not with policy, but with truth." Traoré opened first. Calm. Controlled. "You have incited disobedience under the guise of justice. You are an actor, not a leader. Burkina Faso is not your stage." Denzel didn't flinch. He leaned forward, voice steady. "Then stop performing like a dictator and start listening like a man." The room froze. Translation earpieces crackled. Some diplomats gasped. But Denzel wasn't done. He reached into his jacket and pulled out a single photo, a 14-year-old Burkinabe boy, missing since the last protest crackdown. He didn't get a summit. He didn't get a microphone. He just vanished. Tell me, is that sovereignty? Or fear in uniform? The silence was deafening. Traoré clenched his jaw. "Your people kill with bombs. Mine defend with silence." Denzel rose from his chair, slow and deliberate. "Silence isn't defense. It's neglect. And no child should be its victim." Live translations couldn't keep up. Hashtags exploded across social media. Hashtag Geneva confrontation. Hashtag Denzel versus power. Hashtag truth does not kneel. Back in the U.S., streets filled with rallies. In Paris, monuments were lit in red to honor victims of political oppression. In Ouagadougou, chants of La Vérité rang out from rooftops. Denzel didn't wait for applause. As the summit ended, he whispered to the cameras, "The world doesn't need another hero. It needs memory. And the courage to say what it remembers." He walked off stage. Not as a performer, but as a force no regime could erase. You can silence the microphones, but you can't silence the mothers crying for their sons. You can rewrite history books, but you can't rewrite the scars carved into the backs of the forgotten. Leadership isn't a crown you place on your head, it's a weight you carry on your soul. And if you wear that crown while the people bleed, then you're not leading, you're hiding. I didn't come here to win applause. I came to remind you that dignity isn't negotiable. Not in Burkina Faso. Not in America. Not anywhere. The world heard what you said, Mr. Traoré. But more importantly, they saw what you did. And history? It never forgets.